Okay, thank you, Cindy, and thank you for getting us grounded into that idea of relating to our emotions. Because when we're in a skillful way to relate to our emotions, we're free from relating from our emotions. And most of us know that that's usually a good practice, not to relate from our emotions. Most of us know if we get a phone call and we're feeling pretty hot and we're feeling pretty angry, it's probably better not to respond to someone when we're feeling that way. We're better to wait and just let our emotions pass through us. And this idea of our emotions passing through is not a new one. Rumi said it in a beautiful poem. And I wanted us to get grounded in this energy and this atmosphere of this poem, inviting us to the sacred practice of relating to our emotions. And he said, this being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight, the dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. And I found that poem to be consistently true as I teach people this practice of mastering the emotions by relating to the emotions. And the actual skill of mastering the emotions is how to navigate through a lower emotional vibration to bring it into its opposite positive possibility. And that is really the skill of mastering the emotions. It's a life-changing skill. And as Cindy and I have talked about, we believe that it could be a life-saving skill, because there is more and more evidence about the connection between our emotional experience and our physical diseases. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But in order for us to understand how to be in right relationship to our emotions, we really want to understand how our emotional patterning got set up in the first place. And I referred to this a little bit last time when we talked about how thoughts get set up. And it's the same mechanism. And I just wanted to talk about it again to touch base to it so that you have a context and an understanding about how you're going to relate to these energies that come through your system. And you make the distinction between where are they coming from? Is it mine? Is it someone else's? So the emotions that I'm talking about are the emotions that arise out of trauma in childhood. And I encourage everybody to take a journey back down their timeline and make a map of each experience that you went through that was significant in that it felt overwhelming to your system. Anything that the spirit perceives as too intense or too overwhelming goes into a certain mechanism of response. So if we look back down our biography, we can get a map of what may be happening inside our biology, because everything that's happened in our history has its trace inside our physical container, in our energetic system, in our nervous system, in our neural pathways, in various different ways. So what I'd encourage you to do is take a look down your timeline and connect to experiences that you perceived as overwhelming, because there are a couple of things that happen automatically when you go through an overwhelming experience. First of all, the mind comes in to create a perception, because that's what the mind does. It needs to make sense of the experience. The next thing that happens is we stop breathing fully, because if we stop breathing fully, we stop feeling fully. And that mechanism allows us to turn down the volume of the intensity of the energy that's passing through our system. So it's a very valuable coping mechanism, but it has a couple of negative consequences. First of all, it creates frozen ice cubes of energy that are not digested, and they migrate somewhere within our chakra system, and they sit and they wait for us to come back and melt them. And second of all, it teaches a habit and a pattern of response to emotion to turn down the volume and not fully feel our feelings, which is in fact the exact wrong direction, because the highest truth of healing our emotions is all feelings fully felt and integrated can transform into love, joy, and happiness. So what does that actually mean? What does it mean, all feelings fully felt? How do we fully feel a feeling? So fully feeling a feeling means to relate to it as a physical sensation, to relate to it as an energy in motion throughout your system. And integrating a feeling means bringing the breath back to them. So there's certain breathing techniques and certain breathing patterns that address specific emotional energies and allow you to transmute them. And I'll just give you an example of what we can do that we're habituated to do with our emotions that is an incorrect way to relate to them. And then I'll give you an example of the correct way to relate to them. So for example, we could say, oh, I've got a tightness in my chest and can't hardly get the breath in there, and I know why that is. That's because my heart's broken, and my heart's broken because my boyfriend betrayed me, and my boyfriend betrayed me because this is what men do. And then we go into this storyline of explaining our sensations away that takes us out of the sensation and takes us away from the relationship to the emotion. So what I'd encourage you to start practicing is when you feel something is happening inside your energetic system, inside your physical body, and inside your emotions, like, oh, I've got a pain in my chest. Become curious, become interested, go towards that sensation with an investigation of, okay, let me describe that feeling. It feels heavy. It feels constricted. Let me touch it with my awareness. Let me bring my breath to it. And there are certain breathing patterns that I've talked about in the course, and I can talk about later if you want to, about how to actually relate to these different emotional frequencies. And I have been convinced for years and years that our adverse childhood experiences, our trauma in our childhood, affects our physical health. But it's been hard for me to find studies that back up this information. And I'm excited because I found a study, and I just want to share with you what that study says, and also direct you. There's a YouTube of a lady called Nadine Byrne, I think her name is. I'll get her name for you by the end of this presentation. And she's done some brilliant work on the relationship between our childhood trauma and our adult physical prognosis, what's going to happen. And there was a study that was done on 17,000 people who were asked to basically do what I asked you to do, to look back in their history and see what adverse experiences they'd gone through in their childhood. And, you know, they gave them a point for each of these adverse experiences, and they related to things like physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, parents that were addicted or maybe incarcerated, parents that got divorced, or domestic violence. And they discovered that 67% of the population had at least one of these experiences. So, you know, it's not an unusual occurrence. It's quite common that this can happen. And 12.6% of the population had 4 or more. And with 4 or more, the consequences on their health are 2 times more likely to have heart disease and hepatitis, 4 times more likely to have depression, 12 times more likely to commit suicide, and 2 times more likely to have cancer. And, you know, these experiences affect brain development, the immune system, the hormonal system, how DNA is read and transcribed, 3 times greater risk of heart disease, and 20-year difference in life expectancy. So this, what I want to point out, is if it's untreated, if it's not addressed, if it's not resolved, that's what can happen. And that's why Cindy and I are so enthusiastic to get these messages out, because the tools that we're sharing are the things that can treat these situations and treat the consequences of the early childhood trauma and maybe even past life trauma, but various different ways in which we've accumulated energy within our system that needs to be digested. So I want to show you how to actually transform a lower emotional vibration into its positive possibility. And I want to frame that by underscoring what Cindy said. First of all, feel it. Be connected to feeling a lower emotional vibration to allow it to inform you of whatever information it has. First of all, it can guide you to exactly the doorway where you need to pay attention, because those lower frequencies will be connected to some chakra in the body. They'll be connected to either the lower first chakra or in the throat or in the heart. And that's important information to get into. Well, what does it need to be met, to be transmuted? So there are 3 steps of mastering the emotions. I call it the good mood pharmacy, and it's the ABC of the good mood pharmacy. And the first step is awareness. So that's about cultivating that practice of being a curious investigator, relating to the emotions as energy in motion, the physical sensations, not the story. Disconnect from any storyline. Come into being very skilled at recognizing, okay, there's energy that's backed up in my heart, or it's accumulating around my throat, so that you can bring your mental awareness and even your physical awareness, placing your hands on the place where energy may be accumulated or it may be backed up. Then you start to digest that emotion by bringing the breath into that particular area. And as I say, there's different breathing techniques for different areas, and we'll get more specific and finely tuned on what they are. But if we all just started doing a diaphragmatic breath or doing the full yogic breath, then that's increasing our ability to digest that emotion. It's increasing our awareness into where it might be. And then the third thing is compassion, to occupy a frequency of love and kindness towards the self, to bathe the cells inside a beautiful love bath. And I showed you last time this image of the chakra system, because I love this image because it's 2,000 years old, and this was intelligence and wisdom that we had way back then in our understanding of our energetic system and how it functions and how it works and relates to everything, and why it's important. So on the outer edges of our physical reality, we have these nadis, these very thin rivers of energy that actually go outside of the physical body into our auric system, that connect to our meridians that run through our physical system, that feed into our chakras. And each of our chakras has a specific emotional frequency in its lower and higher vibrational forms. So, for example, in the first chakra, the emotional frequency in its lower vibrational form runs in the family of anger, agitation, irritation. When we meet those emotions with the ABC of the good mood pharmacy, we can transmute that anger and that agitation into compassion and courage. In the second chakra, in the yellow area of the body, it's the emotion of fear. And when that is met with the good mood pharmacy, the ABC, it transmutes into wisdom, anxiety into peace and equanimity and power, and feeling unlovable transmutes into being loved, and so on up through the chakra system. And I just wanted to show you this, they call it the yogic brain, the 7 chakras and the frequency and the vibration in each of the chakras. So we've mentioned it before, but I want to underscore that each emotion carries a vibration and a frequency. And each of the chakras, as I said, there's a lower frequency and then the highest frequency possible. So the first chakra relates to our instincts, our sense of safety and support. The second chakra to our emotions, the third to our mind and compassion with the fourth, and so forth up the chakra system. And the tools that I use and are presented to you in the course to get into those swirling energy eddies that get created at a time of trauma. When we lock down on the breath, we trap energy in the body. So we want to have skillful means to get back into those frozen ice cubes of energy and start to melt them. And the skillful means that we have available to us on the course are, you know, a state of relaxed wakefulness, the breath, awareness, compassion, visualization, positive memory, raised emotional frequency, skillful questions, affirmations, and behavior change. And I would say one of the best tools, and really underutilized and not really talked about a lot, in getting into these places to melt down these frozen ice cubes of energy, is positive memory. So the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between an experience and an imagination of an experience. So when we get into healing and transmuting these lower vibrations into their opposite positive, if we can remember a time or just imagine a time where we could feel safe, let's say, for example, or where we feel loved, and we allow that feeling to soak ourselves, then we're actually residing inside that vibration and inside that frequency. So I have a huge invitation for you to listen to the body, because it's smarter than we are, and to be like a curious investigator, to really just touch and be present with our emotions, and to develop a stronger relationship with our energetic system. And this slide shows how the wavelength of a frequency runs through the DNA. So fear has a long, slow wavelength through the DNA strands, and it activates only on a few points into our DNA, which is our light, our love, our potential, our creativity, our vitality. And we want this potential of our DNA to be activated. So when you're in the higher frequencies, the wave is short and you're hitting on more points of your DNA strands. And this is why love and compassion are the highest forms of intelligence, and they are the skills to cultivate at this time. Because when we establish this sort of relationship to our emotions and to our energetic system, we become the most powerful force in the room. And everything changes when you start to emit your own frequency, rather than absorbing the frequencies of those around you. When you start imprinting your intent on the universe, rather than receiving an imprint from existence. So that is why I'm dedicated to this task of really supporting us in having a strong and effective relationship to our energetic system and to our emotions. And that's why I've created the tools that I've created that give this specific technology to show you how to do that. And all in the course, all the meditations are there. So I invite you to participate with those tools.